Hello fellow makeup lovers, how are you guys doing today? I'm super excited for this video because it is another day of Indie Miss, and today we're going to be discussing if I could recommend you one eyeshadow palette from each of my favorite indie brands, what it would be. I actually saw my friend AMYLOVES do this video about a year and a half ago, and I thought it was such a good idea of, you know, just like an indie starter guide. If you haven't tried anything from a brand, like where do you start, especially when they have a ton of palettes. So I thought that I would share my opinions, share the palettes I would recommend, and we actually don't have any of the exact same recommendations, which I'm not surprised because her video did come out a little while ago, but I will leave it linked down below for you regardless, and I highly recommend checking out Angelica's channel if you have not yet. So like I said, I pulled out all of my favorite indie brands, the ones that I have a ton of palettes from, and I'm going to be sharing with you the top palette I would recommend from each brand. Let's go ahead and jump on in. Honestly, majority of these brands, I own every single eyeshadow palette that they have come out with. So I really hope that this guide will be helpful for you. Let's just start off with Adept Cosmetics because they are one of my favorite indie brands, and I'm so excited because if you asked me to recommend one eyeshadow palette, I knew what it was right off the bat, and it was gone for a while. It was supposed to be limited edition and they brought it back. Hallelujah. I'm not mad about it at all because this palette is worth bringing back over and over again. So that is going to be the Heather Austin palette with Adept. I honestly feel like you cannot go wrong with this one because it has the classic Adept like shimmer to matte ratio. You've got so many intense, beautiful shimmers. I'm telling you, if you're looking for an Adept palette to try, start off with something that is mostly shimmers because that is where their shadows really shine, literally and figuratively. You've got multi-chromes in here. You've got some really stunning metallics. You've got duochromes, inner corner shades, and also the mattes are being only 4 shades. I feel like there's so many looks that you can do with them. This is just an absolute favorite. I have raved about it time and time again. I told myself I wasn't even gonna do swatches for this video, but who am I kidding? Like, you guys just need to see this swatched out, see these shimmers in action. They are gorgeous. I have done many videos on this palette, so if you're looking for more content, you can definitely search it up on my channel, but highly recommend out of everything. So next, let's talk Shroud Cosmetics. I'm going to recommend to you the Peaches and Dreams palette because this is so beautiful. I feel like it has the classic matte formula from Shroud that is super opaque and just looks really plush and velvety on the eyes. And these shimmers are super intense. Some of their older palettes, they have really stunning color stories, but these shimmers are updated, and so they're not like more like dry metallics. They're more like super intense sparkly shadows, and I just love them so much. So if I had to recommend one, it would definitely be this. Again, we just need to swatch these out because I feel like you need to see just how stunning all of these shimmers turned out. I love this updated formula, and I feel like if you tried some of the old palettes, you might have mixed feelings about the formula, but I promise the updated version is definitely worth raving about. Next, let's talk about Fantasy Cosmetica. I have all of their palettes, and this one I just have to recommend. It is the Rogue palette. This is definitely more for the cool tone lovers, but I feel like this was the perfect palette for you to try from Fantasy Cosmetica because it has a great mixture of mattes. You've got like a full complete look no matter what, and it's capturing like the grungy essence of the brand. But all of the shimmers in here are so intense, so beautiful. And I feel like in a lot of the other palettes from Fantasy Cosmetica, they have 1 or 2 of these intense shimmers, but here you've got like the whole shebang, and it is just stunning. Like, I know I should probably swatch some mattes for you as well, but I just can't help myself. Like, look how gorgeous. If you're into purples, like, okay, next we have Menagerie Cosmetics, which I haven't tried their more recent palettes, but if I had to recommend one to you, it would be the Flight Club palette. This is personally my favorite matte formula that they've ever done. I just really love this color story. I know it's very monochromatic. It is very purple, so It really depends on you and if you like purples, but if you do, these mattes are so smooth. They blend beautifully. The shimmers are really, really pretty in here as well. Look at that matte. The tones are so good. Like, come on. So creamy. Okay, next we have Glaminatrix, which is an Australian indie brand, and I'm pretty sure I own all of their palettes. So I have to recommend to you the Nearly Natural palette. I feel like if you are a neutral lover, this is the most gorgeous palette. It's got neutrals, it's got a little pop of color. You can go green, you can go a little warmer, you can go a little cooler, a little plummy, but it all just looks absolutely stunning. And the formula and the shimmers in here is amazing. They're so sparkly. I feel like this is one of the most beautiful neutral palettes to exist from an indie brand. It actually makes me want to do like an updated, like the best of the best neutral palettes from indie brands, because I know sometimes the neutral lovers feel a little left behind because a lot of indie brands are doing super colorful palettes. I love that too. It just depends on the day, but just got to swatch some of these for you because they are so beautiful. I've described this as the perfect bridal palette so many times because that's how I see this. Like, I feel like it is just the most classic glam, nearly natural color story and formula. I know my eyelids don't naturally sparkle, but they should. Next we have Ace Beauté, which I don't own all of their palettes, but I do have quite a healthy bunch. My personal favorite they've ever released is the Tropical Vibes palette. This is a good mixture of some neutral and some green, and I really love this one because the mattes are all stunning, but they pretty much have really good mattes across the entire line. Like, no matter what palette you're going for, pretty solid mattes. But I in particular love the shimmers that are in this palette because they are super intense, especially the shade Rainforest. I feel like it just goes with everything and is so beautiful and metallic. And I just love like these like grungy green tones. I feel like Angie did a better job at sharing palettes that were like overall recommendations, and I'm doing more of like my favorites. But I don't know, I'm having a hard time separating, like, my favorite should be your favorite. Next we have Odin's Eye, and this is the palette that I'm actually wearing right now. And honestly, this was the hardest brand to choose the one palette that I would recommend out of because there's so many good palettes. But I decided to go with the Merry Christmas palette just because I feel like it's half like super pretty greens and then half like this like neutral, like warm moment. I feel like you would get a really good taste for Odin's Eye out of this palette because they do have some more traditional shimmers, but then they also have some of their like super sparkly, intense, like duochrome type shades. I feel like this could work for a lot of people's different styles. I just feel like these are so good. So creamy. Of all the colors, I went so neutral with my swatches, but that's just where my heart was calling. Okay, next I have Melt Cosmetics, and for this one, I'm going to recommend to you the Fatally Yours palette, which they did in collaboration with Bailey Sarian. And this might be a bold choice because there are no shimmers in this palette, but if I'm being realistic, I feel like by not having shimmers in this palette, you're actually not missing out on anything because I don't think that Melt has that good of shimmers. Like, sometimes they're nice, but I feel like in general, there's so many brands where I just prefer their shimmers so much more. I feel like Melts have more fallout. They're like that thicker like texture. They just don't look as like shiny or pretty. And I don't know, it depends. Sometimes they're nice, but overall, like, it's definitely not my favorite from the brand. I feel like their mattes are what stand out more. And this palette has so many beautiful grungy mattes. I actually feel like there's different parts of the palette that reminds me of different palettes that I love from them. Like, I can see a little bit of the Gemini palette in here. I can see a little bit of the Muerte palette in here. And I just feel like you're kind of getting it all in one. And this is a deep, grungy, like just delicious palette. Using the description delicious lightly because every single one of these shades is named after like poison. But I don't know, I feel like this is the one I would recommend. I feel like this is Melt's whole vibe in one palette. like all the grunginess. I feel like those are swatching slightly more sheer, and it's not the fault of the palettes at all. It's actually my fault because I've wiped off the swatches so many times that my hand is starting to dry out some, but I promise they're so good. Blend Bunny is another one that was really, really hard to choose which one I would recommend to you, but I'm gonna go with the Sickly Sweet palette. I'm gonna follow my heart. I am slightly biased because I'm obsessed with this palette right now, but I just feel like I would recommend this one because it is truly the best pastels that have ever been done in an eyeshadow palette. I don't say that lightly. And you still have some really beautiful deepening shades. You still have some really beautiful shimmers. I mean, I guess this is not exactly like delivering like the aesthetic of Blend Bunny, which is why I'm like slightly hesitant to recommend this one as like my top palette from them. But at the same time, I'm like, it's so good. But is it the perfect representation of the brand? Good Lord, why do I take everything so seriously? I had a brief intermission for my dog throwing up, but I'm gonna give you a second option because I know pastels are not for everyone and I'm just overthinking this a lot. But I would also say the Sugar and Grunge palette is a good one because this has more of like the typical aesthetic of Blend Bunny. I feel like you've got like that really great like just organization. You've got a beautiful row of shimmers, and in this palette you have a mixture of some color, you've got some neutrals, some really cool tones, a little tiny bit of grunginess. So I feel like this would probably be a better like overall palette just to recommend to like an overall person not knowing exactly what your preferences are. This could be a really good place to start from the brand, and honestly their quality is always on par. I feel like no matter where you start, you're probably going to be happy with your purchase. So for Sydney Grace, I'm going to recommend to you the Tiny Marvels palette. This was their collaboration with Mel Thompson, and it just remains one of my favorite palettes to this day. It is a really good palette to recommend because I feel like it has that like half neutral, half colorful color story. Whichever direction you lean, you've got something in here. And the shimmers, they're not like that super sparkly, intense shimmer that a lot of indie brands have going on. These are more just like super metallic. They're just buttery soft and shiny on the eyes and really, really beautiful. Some of their other palettes, the metallics are not quite this shiny. It's really like a case by case thing. But look how beautiful these are. Cannot go wrong with the Tiny Marvels palette. All right, y'all, so those are the 10 indie brands. Those are the 10 palettes that I would recommend for you to start with for any of these brands. They're some of the best indie palettes available, but if I did not talk about a brand that you're wanting recommendations from, or if you have any questions about a specific eyeshadow palette, feel free to leave them down below. I'll answer to the best of my ability. And I also have literally hundreds and hundreds of videos of indie makeup, so you can always search on my YouTube like homepage for a specific brand and find everything I've ever done about them. If I've got rankings and reviews and first impressions and swatches, it'll all be there. But that is everything. I hope that this was helpful. Like I said, I will have Angie's video linked down below. Credit to her for this really, really good idea, and I'll see you guys in the next one tomorrow for another day of Indie Miss. Bye.